Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you are watching this video lecture. In the earlier session, we started the discussion on the theory of supply as part of Unit 3 of Chapter 2 related to business economics. And we discussed about some of the determinants of supply. In other words, what are the factors that will influence the supply, including the price of the commodity itself and the prices of other goods, prices of factors of production, state of technology, government policy, and the nature of competition as well as the size of industry. All these factors will have an impact on the supply. We discussed these determinants of supply in the earlier session. Now let us focus on the law of supply, which is exact mirror of the law of demand naturally, because these two on the different sides of the market. Now, the law of supply is basically the study of relationship of quantity supplied of a commodity with one or more related variables which have an influence on the supply of the good, but basically that means price, though it can be related with any of the other factors also. Basically, the law of supply looks at the relationship between the price of a commodity and the quantity supplied of a commodity, and how the law of supply holds. What is the law of supply? What it will tell us? Naturally, always, other things remaining constant, ceteris paribus, the quantity of a good produced and offered for sale, which is nothing but the quantity of supply, will increase as the price of the good rises, and vice versa. In other words, the quantity supplied will decrease as the price falls, which means the price of the commodity and quantity supplied of that commodity are in direct relationship. Why is that? We already discussed it. The same thing is repeated here. Why is that? Because when the prices are more, profits will be greater. Naturally, that will give more motivation and incentive to produce the good more and more and offer it for sale in more and more quantities. That is going to be in general true in almost all the cases. Of course, exception will always be there. For example, if you take the supply of labor as it is, we cannot call it a commodity. But for example, if you consider that also as a commodity at very high wages, we can understand the supply of the labor has decreased instead of increasing. In other words, at very high wages, the supply of the labor might not have increased, but rather it would have been decreasing. That's a very vague exception, but as an exception to the normal law of supply, we can consider that. But not too much focusing on something which is not actually a commodity, like labor. If you consider normal commodities, goods and services, definitely higher the prices, higher will be the supply. Lower the prices, lower will be the supply. That's how generally it will happen. So the behavior of supply definitely depends upon various possible adjustments also in the supply. So the essence of the law of supply is the price of a commodity and the quantity supplied are directly related. However, as we discussed in the earlier session already, once again, is it possible to adjust these supplies in the short run? Prices increased, so suddenly the supply will also increase. That much quickly it may not be possible. So it may be taking time and it will definitely take a long time where the supply can be adjusted in response to a changes in price. So we should understand the limitation. It's not going to be an immediate response of the quantity supplied to the price, but eventually there will be a response. That is what we should be interested in, not about the quickness of response, which is questionable, which is going to be differing from industry to industry. So, keeping the timing of the change apart, definitely there is an impact of price on the quantity supplied. Yes, that's what is law of supply. And now we can observe this by taking a supply schedule and a supply curve the same way what we did during discussion of demand schedule and demand curve. What is a schedule is nothing but tabular presentation. It's a table. What is a curve? Nothing but graphical presentation. So let us see the supply schedule. An imaginary example naturally of a particular good X. So as the price of this commodity X increasing per kg from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, the quantity supplied also is increasing from 5 kgs to 35 kgs to 45, then to 55, then to 65, like that. So as the price of the commodity increases, the quantity supplied also increases. That's what we can observe from this supply schedule as an example. And if we plot the same thing on the graph, then you can see the supply curve is going upwards from left to right. Why is that? That is because of the direct relationship between price of the commodity and quantity supplied. And just if you remember, the demand curve was sloping downwards from left to right. Why was that? Because of inverse relationship between the price of the commodity and quantity demanded. Price was always on the y-axis, whether it is supply curve or demand curve. What is changing is x-axis. In case of demand curve, quantity demanded was on the x-axis, and as the price keeps on increasing, the quantity demanded keeps on decreasing. Or as the price keeps on decreasing, the quantity demanded keeps on increasing. Both are same. If we say from this example where price increased from 2 rupees to 3 rupees, if you consider this, from 2 rupees to 3 rupees, if the price has increased, what is the impact on the quantity supplied? Quantity supplied has increased from, this is looking like 35 to, this is looking like 45. So when the price increased from 3 rupees to 2 rupees, 2 rupees to 3 rupees, when the price increased, quantity supplied increased from 35 to 45. If we consider, let us say, same thing can be understood in reverse way also. If price decreased from 3 rupees to 2 rupees, if price has decreased from 3 rupees to 2 rupees, then we can say the quantity supplied has also decreased from 45 to 35. So whichever direction we take, the result is same. And what is the result? In case of demand curve, it was sloping downwards, which means as the price was decreasing on the y-axis, the quantity demanded on the x-axis was increasing. This was the relation of the demand curve earlier. Now we are talking about a supply curve. So here, as the price is increasing, here as the price is increasing, the quantity supplied is also increasing. That is why it is sloping upwards. But what is there on the y-axis? Then also same price. Here also same price. What is there on the x-axis? Then it was quantity demanded, but now it is quantity supplied. That is the difference. And this downward sloping demand curve indicates inverse relationship between the price and quantity demanded. Upward sloping supply curve indicates direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. That's it. that is a supply curve, which shows or proves the law of supply. Just for understanding, we can say the supply curve here is having positive slope, whereas demand curve had negative slope. It was sloping downwards. Here the supply curve is positive slope, sloping upwards. All these things can be understood from the graphical representation of this law of demand and law of supply. That is the graphical representation and tabular representation of the theory of supply, we can say. Now, if this is a supply curve of a particular commodity X, what we have taken, can we take the market supply also? Definitely yes. Will it have any different phenomena? No, it will also be same. Just like market demand, the market supply also will be nothing but a sum total of all the individual firms' supplies. So add all the individual firms' supplies, you will get market supply. And how the tendencies, it will show market supply. It will show the same tendencies like individual supply also. It is also governed by the law of supply, definitely, which means once again, the market supply curve will also be definitely sloping upwards, just like an individual supply curve. So individual demand curve, market demand curve, individual supply curve or market supply curve, they will have no much of difference. So whether we say the supply curve is going upwards, this is possible for one particular supplier, one particular manufacturer, and this is quite possible for the entire market also. So that is why the nature of demand curve and supply curve will always be the same. This should be always kept in mind. Demand curve sloping downwards from left to right, supply curve sloping upwards from left to right, which shows the direct relationship between the price and quantity supplied and inverse relationship between the price and quantity demanded. This is what we can understand from the law of supply, which is a just mirror image of law of demand. It will be the opposite of it. Now, what is the difference between movements on the supply curve or increase or decrease in quantity supplied? Again, we are going to the same words. When we use the word quantity supplied, what are we talking about? We are talking about changes in the supply due to changes in its price only price, which is the graph we are talking about here. That is the supply curve normally. So why the supply curve is changing and how is it changing? How is the movement here from one place to another place? From this point to this point, how the movement is? It is on the supply curve. From this point to this point also, it is on the supply curve. So this can be called as movements on the supply curve or along the supply curve, we can call it. So when the supply of a good increases as a result of increase in its price or vice versa, we say that there is an increase in what? Not supply. We use the word quantity supplied. Whenever the word this is used, ideally what we should understand, we are studying the relationship of price and quantity supplied. Then there is a upward movement in the supply curve. Naturally, when we say supply has gone from this level to this level, this level to this level, let us say. So like this it has gone. So what can we say? What has happened? Definitely the quantity supplied earlier was this, but now it is this. What has happened to that? It has also increased. And why it has happened? It has happened due to an increase in price. So when there is an increase in price and as a result of that there is an increase in quantity supplied, where the movement is happening? The movement is happening on the supply curve or along the supply curve, but there is no shift in the supply curve. So that's what is movements on the supply curve, we can say. And reverse also can be said when there is a change from one point to another point. Just to take it as an example once again, same thing in a different graph. Let us take first example where the price has increased from P to P1. P was the original price, P1 is the new price. Then what happened to the quantity? supplied, quantity supplied has increased from Q to Q1. So where the movement happened from here to here. That is on the supply curve. The movement is on the supply curve only. But this is upward movement. Upward movement happened. So we can say this is what is happening here. Upward movement in supply curve indicates what? That indicates upward movement on the supply curve. Indicates what? That is an increase in the quantity supplied. That creates, let us say if this is point A, if this is point A, and if this is point B, that indicates is a movement from point A to point B. That is an upward movement, we can call it. Reverse also is possible, right? Let us say price has decreased from P1 to P. Original price was P1, now it has decreased from P1 to P. Now naturally the quantity supplied also will decrease from Q1 to Q. Earlier quantity supplied at price P1 was Q1. Now the quantity supplied is Q. So it is not Q1 anymore. It is Q now. So from Q1 to Q, what happened? The quantity supplied has decreased. Then what we can call? There is also again a movement on the supply curve, but this time it is a downward movement on the supply curve from point B to point A. Earlier it was moving from A to B, which was an upward movement on the supply curve. Now it is moving from B to A, which is a downward movement on the supply curve itself. So what can we conclude from this? When we say the movement is on the supply curve, whether it is an increase or decrease, whatever it might be, on the supply curve or along the supply curve, when we say there is a movement, that means the quantity supplied has changed in accordance to a change in the price. Then only we say it is the movement on the supply curve or along the supply curve. So relationship is between what here? Price and quantity supplied. Then when can we say that there is a shift in the supply curve? Shift is different, movement on the supply curve is different. Supply curve itself is shifting. When it will shift? It will shift when the total quantity supplied or supply, just you can call it, is happening not due to price. It is due to any factor other than price. So that is when we say there is a shift in the supply curve. So whenever there is a supply curve shifts towards the right or left, what we can tell is the quantity supplied has changed, or better to use the word supply has changed. But why it has changed? Due to any reason other than its own price. Other than price, maybe because of any other reason the supply curve has shifted rightwards or leftwards. There are many possibilities why the supply curve shifts rightwards or leftwards. But one thing for sure, when the supply curve has shifted rightwards, what does it indicate? Take this point for example. If supply curve is here and here, what is the quantity supplied according to that is different. Though at the same price, price is not changing, price is same. Same price, on S1, the quantity supplied is Q1. On S2, the quantity supplied is Q2, let us say. Definitely what happened? From Q1 to Q2, the quantity has increased or decreased? It has increased. So what can we use the word here? This can be called as an increase in supply. Not increase in quantity supplied, increase in supply. That is a rightward movement, or rightward shift is a better word. Rightward shift to the supply curve indicates an increase in supply. Then opposite, naturally, when we say there is a decrease in supply, when there is a leftward shift, like this. In the second scenario, where there is a leftward shift in the supply curve, that will tell us the supply has reduced. That can also be seen. Take the same price, for example, here. Let us take this is Q2 and this is Q1. So what happened here? Originally the supply was S2. Now the supply curve shifted from S2 to S1. Means from here it has gone to here. There is a leftward shift in the supply curve. What happened to the quantities? If you observe on the x-axis, from Q2 to Q1 they have decreased. So we can call this as a decrease in supply curve. So increase in supply curve indicates a rightward shift. This is rightward shift. That is an increase in the supply curve. Leftward shift in the supply curve indicates a decrease in supply. That's all. That is about shifts in the supply curve. Again, conceptually nothing different from shifts in demand curve, movements on the demand curve, same logic. Only point is the direction of the curve has changed. There we talked about a downward sloping curve, and if there was a price and quantity demanded relationship, movements happened along the curve, whatever they might be. But whereas in case of a shift in demand or a shift in the demand curve earlier, that would have been as a result of any other factor other than price. So that is when the demand curve will move either upwards, in that case we can say there is an increase in demand, or downwards, in that case we can say there is a decrease in demand. That we discussed already in the chapter of demand. Just opposite of that is here, when the supply curve moves rightwards, that means there is a increase in the supply. When the supply curve moves leftwards, that means there is a decrease in supply. Only the shape of the curve is different. The concept is same about movements on the curve or shift in the curve. But common point and important point to be remembered is, in both cases, movements on the curve when we are talking about either quantity demanded or quantity supplied. One of them, we are talking about them, and that is happening as a result of what? As a result of a price change. But when we talk about shifts in the supply curve, when we say shifts, that is happening why? It is happening due to any factor other than price. And we know so many factors are there which will influence supply. Now you can take examples of each of the factors that we have discussed earlier. For example, let us say, if there is a shift in the technology, let us say, the technology has improved. What happens to supply curve if the question asks? If the technology improves, definitely the supply will increase. So supply curve will shift rightwards. Let us say the cost of the factors of production has increased. Cost of the factors of production has increased. If it has increased, the supply will decrease. That means the supply curve will shift leftwards. Let us say the government has introduced some new taxes. Then that is going to shift the supply curve to the leftwards because it creates a negative impact on supply. Let us say the government has introduced a subsidy scheme. Then supply curve will shift rightwards because it will increase the supply. Like this for anything. For taxes it will decrease, for subsidies it will increase. For any factor here, let us say the prices of other commodities. Prices of other commodities, if they have increased, then what happens to the supply curve of original commodity? Supply will decrease because manufacturers will shift from this commodity to the highly priced other commodity. So naturally the supply curve goes leftwards. Shift is possible when we talk about any factors other than the price of its own commodity. Its own price of the commodity, if we consider, then there will not be a shift in the curve, there will be only movements along the curve. But when there is any change in any of the other factors other than price, then the supply curve will shift. Only two options, either it will shift rightwards or leftwards. Supply curve shifting rightwards means increase in supply. Supply curve shifting leftwards means decrease in supply. So we should be able to identify what kind of factors can increase the supply, what kind of factors can decrease the supply. As we discussed many factors earlier, any of those factors will have an influence definitely on the supply. So some of the examples are these. But ultimately the essence has to be definitely clear. Movements and shift. Both are not same. Quantity supplied and supply. Both are not same way used. When we use the word quantity supplied, we are talking about the price changing and quantity supplied changing, which happens when the supply curve is having movements along the curve like this. But when we talk about supply, we say increase or decrease in supply, where the shifts will happen either rightwards or leftwards like this. Increase in supply causes a rightward shift, decrease in supply causes a leftward shift. That's it. That is about graphical representation and understanding of theory of supply and other factors having an influence on supply. Now moving on to another concept. Just like elasticity of demand, we can also calculate elasticity of supply. Elasticity of supply. Logic is still the same. Elasticity of supply what? Normally when we look at these movements along the curve or shift in the supply curve, we are talking about direction. We are not talking about quantification of how the movement actually happens. But if we can quantify the responsiveness of the quantity supplied in relation to a change in its price, that can be called as elasticity of supply. But one point to be noted here, in case of elasticity of demand, if you remember, there was a price elasticity, there was income elasticity, there was advertisement expenditure elasticity, there was cross elasticity. So many elasticities were there. Each of them having an impact on the demand, price of its own commodity, income of the consumers, advertisement expenditure of the suppliers or manufacturers. Each of them has their own impact on the demand or quantity demanded. But here, in case of supply, we don't study all those things. We don't need these many types of elasticities of supply. Only we just focus on one type of elasticity of supply, that is price elasticity. That's it. The why, sir? Why? Because others are difficult to be quantified. We said technology has changed. It has increased the supply. Very good. Technology has increased and supply also increased. This is okay to tell. Just direction you can tell. But how much percentage of the increase in supply is attributable to the technology? It is not possible to be quantified. Difficult to be quantified. So most of the determinants what we talk about of supply, those are all not possible to be quantified, are not easy to be quantified in terms of their impact on the supply. They will have an impact, definitely yes. But how much impact they will have? Will they have more impact? Will they have less impact? That is also okay. But how much impact they will have? Tell me a number. Difficult. That is why we don't worry about all these types of different elasticities of supply will not be there. These will not be there here in supply. Only one elasticity is there, that is price elasticity. That's it. And formula is similar. Formula is not something different. What is the formula? There it was percentage change in quantity demanded. Now it is percentage change in quantity supplied. Percentage change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price. Same way. That is the same formula that we used there, but only difference is instead of demand, we use the word supply. So percentage change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price. In other words, how much percentage change in quantity supplied is there in the numerator as a result of percentage change in price in the denominator. If you consider it like this, delta Q by Q is the percentage change in quantity supplied. Into 100 will be there, but anyway, numerator 100, denominator 100 will be cancelled. We don't need that. So delta Q by Q, delta P by P. So what is delta Q by Q? That is change in quantity supplied, percentage change in quantity supplied. Here Q is representing supply, not demand. P is representing price, that is okay. So delta Q by Q is change in quantity supplied or percentage change in quantity supplied. Delta P by P is representing percentage change in price. So if we cross multiply that, this is wrong actually. It should be multiplication, not equal to. So delta Q divided by delta P into P by Q is the formula that can be used for price elasticity of supply. Because there is only one elasticity, we don't have to every time call it price elasticity, price elasticity. If you just say elasticity of supply, that is automatically price elasticity only. So how to calculate that? Delta Q by delta P into P by Q. That is a formula. There is nothing different in the formula if you remember also. The demand also had the same formula for elasticity of demand, price elasticity of demand. Delta Q by delta P multiplied with P divided by Q. That is the formula. But only point here is what? Q is representing not demand. Q is representing supply. That is the quantity supplied. Delta Q is the change in quantity supplied. Q is the original quantity supplied. P is the original price. Delta P is the change in price. That's what the denotions are here. So Q is denoting the original quantity supplied, and delta Q is denoting the change in the quantity supplied. How much is the change? P denotes original price, and delta P denotes change in the price. We know all these things, nothing new here. But only denotions of Q has changed from demand to supply. Nothing else has changed. As far as computation of elasticity is concerned, formula is same. Only difference is there we use the word quantity demanded, here we use the word quantity supplied. That's it. And of course, these two are factually completely different. Demand is from the consumer's point of view, supply is from the seller's point of view. Look at an example here. Suppose the price of the commodity of X increased from 2000 rupees per unit. That was the original price. We can call this P. And that has increased to 2100 rupees per unit. So how much is delta P? Only change in price we have to take. Delta P is 100 rupees. From 2000 it has become 2100. And consequently what happened? Quantity supplied has changed from 2500. That can be called as Q. To 3000 units. 3000 is not delta Q. Delta Q is change in the quantity supplied. That is only 500 units. So we have all the things. P is 2000 rupees, delta P is 100 rupees. Q is 2500 units, delta Q is 500 units. All that you need to do is substitute in the formula. And what was the formula? Delta Q divided by delta P into P divided by Q. So delta Q is 500 divided by delta P is 100 multiply with original price P, that was 2000, and original quantity supplied was Q, 2500. Do this on the calculator. How much is the elasticity of supply? We will get that. How much is that here? It is coming to be 4. And this will be a positive number. This will be a positive number. Why? Because the price of the commodity and quantity supplied are having direct relationship. In case of elasticity of demand, it was supposed to be a negative number. Why? Because the price and quantity demanded were having negative relationship, negative slope, inverse relationship. So elasticity of demand, price elasticity of demand normally would be negative, whereas price elasticity or just elasticity of supply will be normally positive. In this case, it is coming out to be 4. It is very elastic, definitely, yes, we can say. But can this number be interpreted? Can we say about this number? Definitely yes. We can say this particular commodity X is very elastic, not from demand point of view, from supply point of view. So when can we say the supply is perfectly inelastic? Inelastic means irrespective of the price, the quantity is same. If the supply is perfectly inelastic, the quantity is going to be same even though the price is increasing. Price is increasing, but the quantity still remained the same. At various points, the quantity supplied has remained the same. So that is why we can say, in case a particular product is perfectly inelastic supply, if it has a perfectly inelastic supply, we can also simply say that the price of the product has no impact on the supply. Completely, the quantity supplied or supply has no influence by the price of that commodity. Means Even though there is a change in the price, the quantity supplied of a goods remains unchanged. There is no change in the quantity supplied or supply. If that happens, then perfectly inelastic supply, we can call it. And then how much will be the amount of elasticity of supply? Naturally zero. And how the graph will look like? It will be parallel to y-axis or perpendicular to x-axis. Anyway, these questions can be asked, but we should understand the tendency first. According to the question, we have to use the answer. But ultimately, when the supply curve is parallel to the y-axis, that means the quantity supplied or supply is still going to be same irrespective of the price. That means that product is perfectly inelastic and it has an elasticity of supply 0. That is the elasticity of supply for such kind of commodities. Irrespective of the price changes, quantity supplied remains unchanged. Once again, please don't enter into this quantity supplied and supply discussion. That is not required. That is not having any impact on the understanding. Unnecessarily, we should not complicate it. In the examination, if nothing is mentioned, only the word quantity supplied is used, then we have to understand we are talking about the impact of a price on the quantity supplied. That's all. Here also we are searching that only. We are talking about a price change, but the quantity supplied has not changed. That's okay. Quantity supplied has not changed. When it is possible? When the product is perfectly inelastic, when it has a perfectly inelastic supply, or when you say the elasticity of supply is 0. So elasticity of supply for this type of situation is going to be 0. That is when we can call it perfectly inelastic supply. Then when can we call a particular product is relatively less elastic? There it is elastic, no doubt, but relatively less elastic, little bit less elastic. When can we say that? When we can say that it is relatively less elastic? When naturally the elasticity of supply is more than 0 but less than 1. In other words, the percentage change in quantity supplied is less than the percentage change in price. It has changed, but we cannot say it has not changed. If it has not changed, then the supply curve will be parallel to y-axis or perpendicular to x-axis, where the elasticity of supply is 0, where we have talked about it now. But this is a different story. When a product is called as relatively less elastic supply, if it is having, when there is a change in the supply, no doubt, but the change in the supply or quantity supplied is less proportionately changing when compared with the percentage change in its price. In other words, simply speaking, the numerator, what was the numerator to calculate the elasticity of supply? That is percentage change in quantity supplied. And what is the denominator? That is a percentage change in price. The numerator, if it is less than denominator, imagine if numerator is less than denominator, then naturally the answer will be somewhere in 0 point something. It will not be 1, it will be less than 1. That is for sure. Of course, it is greater than 0, it is positive only. Elasticity of supply will be always positive. So we can't say less than 0. It is less than 1, but more than 0. So it will be 0 point something. 0 point something, whatever that something may be. So in the cases where a product is having an elasticity of supply of less than 1, elasticity of supply is less than 1, what can we call that? We can call that product is relatively less elastic. And again, we are talking about supply. Less elastic does not mean elasticity of demand. So elasticity of supply is less than 1 means a product has a relatively less elastic supply. and numerator is less than denominator. Resultant will be 0 point something. So that is a point to be noted for second category of goods, which are also possible, where they will have less elasticity of supply, which is less than 1. In other words, relative change in the quantity supplied, which is numerator delta Q. Actually, we cannot say delta Q here. Delta Q by delta, just Q. Delta Q by Q is less than the relative change in price, which is delta P by P. So numerator is this delta Q by Q. Denominator is this delta P by P. Numerator is less than denominator. That means the product is having less elastic supply. Then how the graph looks like? How the graph looks like is this. That is figure number 23. What happened here? Yeah, visually it looks like not that different. But if you observe closely, this is more. The change in price is more. The distance between P1 and P2 is more. Distance between them. Whereas the distance between Q1 and Q2 is less. Little less, that's enough, but it is less. So P1 and P2 have a bigger change in them, whereas Q1 and Q2 have a change. They have a change definitely, but that change is smaller. So the change in the quantity supplied here is lesser than the change in price, or percentage change in the quantity supplied has been lesser than the percentage change in price. So when the quantity changed from Q1 to Q2, this is a relatively shorter distance compared to this. This is a little longer distance than this. That can be visually observed. Though there is a small difference, it can be definitely observed that distance between P1 and P2 is more and the distance between Q1 and Q2 is less. Then automatically we can say that product is having a less elastic supply, where the elasticity of supply is less than 1. So that is another category of products. We can observe that where the supply line is like this. It is more slanter. Whereas if it is more flatter, then we can say that the product is having relatively high elastic supply. Then what is the mathematical expression of this? Here the elasticity of supply will be greater than 1. It will be greater than 1. Elasticity of supply is greater than 1. That means what? Numerator is greater than denominator. That means the percentage change in quantity supplied is more than the percentage change in price. So that product is having higher elastic supply. In other words, when the quantity supplied of a good changes substantially, it changes more. Substantially means very much. High amount of change is happening in the quantity supplied in response to a relatively smaller change in the price of a commodity, then we can say that product is relatively greater elastic supply. So we can say it is highly elastic. It is having a highly elastic supply. That's what change shows here. In this case, the numerator is greater than denominator and elasticity of supply is greater than 1. In the earlier case, numerator was less than denominator and elasticity of supply was less than 1. So you need to remember these relationships. And of course, in the earlier case, because it was less than 1, the result will be somewhere between 0 to 1. Here we cannot say that. It is more than 1 means it could be anything. Like in our example earlier, what we calculated, the elasticity of supply was 4, which is definitely more than 1, which means that product was having a greater elastic supply. So that can be observed graphically also in this figure number 24, where delta P is there. This change happened from P1 to P2. This distance is little shorter, and if you observe this distance is longer. Earlier, difference between P1 and P2 was longer, and difference between Q1 and Q2 was shorter. So earlier, this was longer, this was shorter distance wise. Now, this is shorter, that is a change in price, but the quantity supplied has changed drastically. This is longer. That is why the line is more flat. Earlier it was little more slanter. So when you look at two supply lines like this, one is like this and one is like this, automatically we should be able to identify. The first one is having a relatively lesser elastic supply. The second one is having a relatively more elastic supply. Just by the shape of it, we should be able to identify how the supply or quantity supplied of that good is behaving as a result of changes in its price. So in this case, we can say the product is having relatively greater elastic supply. That is when the percentage of change in quantity supplied is more than the percentage of change in price. Also we can call that when the elasticity of supply is greater than 1. When it is greater than 1, numerator is greater than denominator, then we can say that product is having relatively greater elastic supply. Graphically, the line will be little flat compared to the earlier one, which was little more slanted. That's it. That is the third category. Another category also we can say, that is unit elastic. Unit elastic means what? Again, if you visually observe this distance and this distance, these two will be same here. In case of unit elastic supply line, this will be exactly cutting the origin into two equal parts. So we can say from mathematical point of view, the angle of this supply line will be 45 degrees. Why? Because it is 90 degrees graph. Exactly it will cut, this supply line will cut equally. So in case of unit elastic supply, what is the angle of the supply curve if it is a straight line? These are all examples. Will supply be really straight line? Not possible. Supply will change like this, it will change. But we cannot take all those things theoretically. So theoretically, if it make it a straight line passing through the origin, if it is passing through the origin, naturally, it is cutting the x-axis and y-axis equally, which means the angle of the supply curve, in case it is unit elastic, will be 45 degrees. This is going to be 45 degrees angle. That is just another observation when the product is unit elastic. But of course, what is the feature of this here? Feature of this is definitely the elasticity of supply is equal to 1. Yes. And the numerator is equal to denominator. Numerator is equal to denominator. Elasticity of supply is equal to 1. Which means what? The percentage change in the quantity supplied is equal to the percentage change in price. Numerator and denominator both are same. So if let us say the price is increasing by 10%, quantity supplied also is increasing by 10%. Price is decreasing by 10%, quantity supplied is also decreasing by 10%. So this distance and this distance here are same, equal. That is when we can call it unit elastic supply, unitary elasticity of supply. Again, all the times we have to keep in mind we are talking about supply, not demand. But the logic or the concept of understanding where which type of product is having more elasticity, less elasticity, that is same. If a particular product is having a no influence at all with its price, then we can say the elasticity of supply for that product is 0. Then the supply curve will be parallel to y-axis. When a product is relatively less elastic supply, then the elasticity of supply will be less than 1, numerator will be less than denominator, and the resultant will be 0 point something. And the line, the supply curve, will be little slanted. Then, in case the product is having relatively greater elastic supply, that means the elasticity of supply is more than 1, numerator is more than denominator, and the curve will be little flatter compared to the earlier one. If the supply is having unitary elasticity, then elasticity of supply is equal to 1, numerator is equal to denominator, percentage change in quantity supplied is equal to the percentage change in price. Then the nature of the supply curve is exactly it will cut the x and y axis into two equal parts. That means the degree or the angle here of the supply curve in case of unit elasticity will be 45 degrees. What if a product is perfectly elastic supply? Nobody will be there like that. No product will be like that. Just for imagination. 5 categories we have. Perfectly inelastic also is impossible. Perfectly elastic also is impossible almost. Unit elasticity is also impossible almost. How is it possible to exactly have same percentage of change in supply as a result of some change in the price? So three things are ruled out practically. Only two things will happen. Either a product will be having more than one, greater than one elasticity of supply, or less than one elasticity of supply. That is practically, but theoretically all are possible. So we are just looking at the theoretical things which will come in the questions, which will come in the examination questions. So when we can say that the elasticity of supply is infinite, so here the elasticity of supply is infinite. As good as we can say it is not definable, it is infinite. Not that it has a value, it is not definable, it is infinite. Then we can say that product is perfectly elastic. Means what? Even for a very small increase in the price also, the supply can rise from 0 to infinity. Where is the small rise in the price, sir? It is only here only now. We can't even see that much small in the price. Even such a small change in the price also, the supply curve has, or supply quantity supplied has increased drastically. Too much it has increased. It's not possible, but if it happens like that, then we can say that product is having a perfectly elastic supply where the elasticity of supply cannot be defined. In other words, it means it is infinite. So that is infinite elastic supply. But again, point is to note how the graph looks like, how the curve looks like. It looks like parallel to x-axis. When a product is having perfectly elastic supply, the supply curve will be parallel to which axis is the question that will come. We should know it is parallel to x-axis. That's it. That is perfectly elastic supply. Now, moving on to how to measure the supply elasticity. We can measure the supply elasticity already with the formula as we know, which is delta Q by delta P into P by Q, which can be done. But it can be done in different ways also by taking this formula. For example, dq by dp into p by q. So dq by dp into p by q can be another formula. In that case, if we use that at a given point of the supply curve, if we are measuring the elasticity, that is called as point elasticity, and we know this already. Even in the computation of elasticity of demand also, we have used this concept of point elasticity. But how do we use this for solving the problems? That has to be understood. For example, a supply function is given like this. A supply function is a expression in mathematical way about how the quantity is going to be changed according to the change in price. It is mentioned like this: Q is equal to minus 100 plus 10p. Minus 100 plus 10p. And find the elasticity of supply. First of all, we need to find that using point method when the price is 15 rupees, he says. So when the price is 15 rupees, how much is the elasticity of supply, he is asking. So first of all, we need four things here. That is dq by dp, then we need p, then we need q. And don't worry about derivatives and all here, though they are part of your mathematics portion. We don't need to do all of that. We just need to substitute from the given information. P by Q. That is a formula. But this is what? Dou Q by dou P. That is already the differentiation of the supply function, which is 10 in this particular case, because the function is Q is equal to minus 100 plus 10p. So what is dou Q by dou P here? Already from the equation itself, it is 10. but we know how much is P. So dou Q by dou P, we can take it as 10, that is there. Directly from the equation we can take it. P is already given, that is 15. That is already given. But what we don't know so far is Q. That we can find out by substituting P in this function. So if 10P is there, 10 into 15 means 150, minus 100 means 50. So naturally Q will be 50. That's all. So how much is this? It will be 3. So the elasticity of supply in this case is 3. So if any equation, the supply function is given like this, Q is equal to, or you can say normally, is a general expression, Y is equal to A plus BX. Let us say, if that is the one what is given, what is this B? We are talking about X is a variable, but what is this B? That B is the dou Q by dou P. That can be also called as slope of the curve. Here in this case it is supply curve. So once again, not going much into the mathematical aspect of it, when an equation like this is given, A is a constant, B is a constant, Y and X are variables, naturally Q and P are variables, Q is a dependent variable, P is an independent variable because Q is dependent upon P. So in this case Y is a dependent variable, X is a independent variable. And when we say Bx, that B which represents the slope of the line normally, that is dou Q by dou P. So dou Q by dou P in this case will be 10. So that first of all to be taken separately here, 10. Then P is already given in the question, that is 15 rupees. Q we have to find out by substituting in the supply function itself. If you substitute 15 rupees in the place of P, then the Q will be 50. Substitute all of them. We'll get the price elasticity of supply in this case 3, which is indicating that this product is having a relatively higher elasticity of supply. And this is what we do when we calculate point elasticity in case of supply. In demand, we used the point elasticity mostly by graphical method, but here in supply, we calculate the point elasticity with equation than by graphical method. So that is the point elasticity of supply. Now, arc elasticity if you want to calculate, same thing. Here also we have same things, like let us say we know that delta Q divided by delta P multiplied with P by Q is what is the formula for elasticity of supply. What is delta Q? That is nothing but Q1 minus Q2 or Q2 minus Q1, either way it is okay. What is delta P? P1 minus P2, that is delta P. Normally this is okay, this is already there in the normal original formula also. But now in arc elasticity, as we already discussed earlier in demand, what we'll do, instead of taking P by Q, we'll take average of them. P1 plus P2 divided by 2, Q1 plus Q2 divided by 2. So let us say P1 plus P2 by 2 gives average, right? Same way, Q1 plus Q2 divided by 2, that gives average. But why do we need these two? We can just remove them. So directly what it becomes, Q1 minus Q2 divided by P1 minus P2 into P1 plus P2 divided by Q1 plus Q2, because when we do average, divided by 2 in the numerator, divided by 2 in the denominator, both get cancelled. So that's what is the formula you can remember. Ideally you can remember this way. This is how it is the best way of remembering it. So this is first one, that is Q1 minus Q2 divided by P1 minus P2, then multiplied with P1 plus P2 divided by Q1 plus Q2. That is the formula for arc elasticity of supply. And what is P1? Original price. What is Q1? Original quantity supplied. What is P2? New price. And what is Q2? New quantity supplied. And whenever any question is given, wherever, this data will be given. How much is P1, how much is P2, how much is Q1, Q2, we know that. Automatically, substituting it in the formula, we get the elasticity of supply. Let us say, for example, here as it is given, P1 is 12 rupees, P2 is 15 rupees, Q1 is 20 rupees, and Q2 is 50 units. Sorry, Q1 is 20 units and Q2 is 50 units. So P1 and P2 are rupees, Q1 and Q2 are quantities naturally. Substitute it in the formula for arc elasticity. So first of all, what we should do? Q1 minus Q2 or Q2 minus Q1, either way you can do. Let us stick to 1 so that you can remember and apply it easily. So Q1 minus Q2, 20 minus 50, that comes to minus 30, divided by P1 minus P2, 12 minus 15, P1 minus P2 is 12 minus 15, that comes to minus 3, multiplied with P1 plus P2, 12 plus 15, that is 27, divided by Q1 plus Q2, 20 plus 50, that comes to 70. That's all. Do it on calculator. So do it on calculator. Then you can get basically 27 by 7, you can say. That will be how much? Calculate it. You will get the price elasticity of supply, that is 27 divided by 7, 3.85 or 3.86, you can say, is the elasticity of supply in this particular scenario, using which method? Arc elasticity method. And you should remember this formula. This was original formula, which was just a normal formula. If in the exams nothing is mentioned, which one will use? We will use this, not this. In the exams, if nothing is mentioned in the question also, first preference should be given to arc elasticity, because it is more logical, since it is not taking only P and Q, it is taking average of prices and average of quantities. So arc elasticity is always a better alternative to original concept of calculation of elasticity of supply. So this is the original concept, no doubt, of elasticity of supply. But formula wise, computation wise, we should use arc elasticity of supply, which is this. But you should remember in a proper way, don't jumble it. You better remember in this way, as we discussed. Q1 minus Q2 divided by P1 minus P2, multiplied with P1 plus P2 divided by Q1 plus Q2. So what happens in this memory is, even if you by chance forget this formula also, which you should not do, but even if you by chance forget the formula also, if you remember the concept, you will be able to come to the formula. What was the concept? Percentage change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price. Then you can start deriving that. Percentage change in quantity supplied is nothing but delta Q by delta P into P by Q. Then change this P and Q to P1 plus P2 and Q1 plus Q2. Enough. You got arc elasticity formula. So that is why knowing the formula, understanding is one side, remembering is another side. That is about the theory of supply and supply curve, supply schedule, movements along the supply curve, shifts of the supply curve, and then most importantly the elasticity of supply and various possibilities of elasticity of supply, how to calculate elasticity of supply using different methods. Directly we can use the first formula, that is one option, or we can use point method with an equation given and other data given in the question, or even we can use arc elasticity method, by which we can use this formula for computation of elasticity of supply. With that, the aspects related to the supply have been completed. In the next session, we'll continue this discussion with some more aspects of having a intersection between demand and supply. So we discussed demand separately already, more or less with the similar concepts, but just on the opposite side or opposite direction. We discussed the quantity theory of supply also already. So demand and supply both are separately discussed so far. Now if you mix them, what happens? That gives us the overall picture of market. So because market is about the game of demand and supply, how that happens and how equilibrium price in the market will be determined, these aspects related to merging of the concept of demand and supply we will discuss in the next session. Till that time, take care. Bye bye. Thank you very much.